Power of collective intelligence. The name is Dan Winter. Keywords: fractal negentropy. No one people in the world know what is gravity. Holonomic. So, Winter, please explain to me, explain to us.
Well, I'm pleased to be with you. Thank you for the invitation. And by the way, I really think your Italian accent is beautiful. But your question is so perfect. It is the perfect question. And it is about fractality. So to choose a place to start, to say that Einstein was clear that gravity was the geometry of infinite compression, infinite charge compression. So he said for sure that if he knew what infinite compression was, infinite non-destructive compression, he would then have solved the unified field and would know what gravity was, and therefore would have found out what causes an object to fall to the ground. Now, it is also true that in the day of Einstein, he did not know what a fractal was. Fractality is clearly, everyone agrees, it is the geometry of infinite compression. And that's been described mathematically very well. What has been missing, however, is what is the geometry of infinite electric field compression or infinite charge compression. So the science community has regarded fractality as a mathematical problem of achieving a geometric modeling of infinite compression, and that has been solved. But the modeling of infinite electric field or infinite charge compression has not even been considered until my work. And the way I solved the problem, and I believe actually I have, is that initially we did a mathematics to prove that the golden mean ratio was the proven mathematical solution to perfect wave interference, perfect constructive wave interference, which then you can then make the case that it is in fact then the solution to wave compression. That mathematics with the wave equations are at fractalfield.com/mathematics of fusion, and that is a published paper as well in the mathematics literature. So we have clearly proven that the golden ratio is the solution to wave interference, constructive interference, therefore the solution to constructive wave compression. And further then we can make the case that golden ratio is the solution to phase conjugation. Conjugation just meaning to conjugate or recursively add and multiply wave phases or heterodyny or interference. So basically perfected compression. So that's the theory. Then subsequently we proved the case, and again why we think we now know in fact why an object falls to the ground, which apparently Einstein did not. When we showed that the universal wavelength for physics, the fundamental musical key signature for every wave physics as measured, the Planck length and time, it's the wavelength and wave time which divide evenly into everything physics has ever measured. That if you do simple integer whole number golden ratio exponents multiplied by powers of golden ratio times Planck length and time, which is to say phase conjugate, you get exactly a whole series of the radii of hydrogen. You get exactly the two frequencies and wavelengths of photosynthesis, and there's only two. And you get the almost exact duration of the Earth year, the Venus year. You get almost the exact harmonic series, which is the Schumann resonance cascade. You get the exact frequencies of the LF.1 hertz of the HRV, low frequency of the heart. You get the harmonic cascade of brain waves during bliss, which is also the Schumann series. Basically, you get the key frequency series that describes life. And we have converted that now into a technology, and you can read about it on our website, fractalfield.com, which is the Priori device, which uses that same harmonic cascade in the low frequencies, which in the French government proved healed thousands of cancers, and now we have a working prototype, and we're beginning clinical trials in 3 and 4 countries. Point being that this information is now testable as well as theoretical. And the title of the book, my new book, is called Fractal Space-Time, The Origin of Biologic Negentropy. And the term for that harmonic series, which looks like a caduceus, which in physics is called phase conjugation, and this is a hermetic science, that if you take that wave, you see every living system uses that frequency signature only because that is a phase conjugate pump wave. In other words, you get implosion in that geometry only, and you get suction to center, you get charge compression, you get implosion. You get the infinite non-destructive charge compression, which Einstein defined gravity. Einstein's other definition of gravity was indiscriminate from charge acceleration. Basically, he said if you're standing in an elevator and the elevator goes up and the pull you feel toward the floor cannot under any circumstances be differentiated from gravity. It is gravity. In other words, acceleration is gravity. And in the universe, we have only one thing to accelerate, that's charge, because compressed charge, you have mass. So acceleration of charge is gravity. Now, just think about this so that you can sort of be empowered to do this in your mind. If you look at this map of the top-down view that I have newly proven is the top-down view of hydrogen, which is 5 and 10 spirals of the golden mean. You can see the 3D animation at goldenmean.info/grail. And so you have this 5, 10 spirals of the golden mean. It's the perfect top-down view of a pine cone, basically. And as you see, that is also the top-down view of DNA and every living protein, and the way golden ratio creates gravity stability in orbital mechanics, for example. So what happens in that and only that geometry, which is the reason gravity exists and the reason objects fall to the ground, is that as the charge experiences compression in the golden spiral, not just the wave lengths add and multiply constructively recursively, but the wave phase velocities, only in that geometry, can add and multiply recursively, constructively. In other words, the speed of the wave fronts experiences constructive acceleration of charge during compression only in that golden spiral geometry. And that is why the golden spiral is the cause of gravity, because it's the only geometry which allows the compression of charge to become acceleration of charge toward center. The wave fronts accelerate, they add and multiply their speed, their phase velocity. So the surfer is accelerated down that spiral. And that's the reason that charge goes through the speed of light out the center of hydrogen by golden ratio multiples of the speed of light, and that's Raymond Chow's work. And that experience of acceleration from compression is called gravity. Now, this in itself would be theoretical, except now we can extrapolate the origin of every negentropic and centripetal force in the universe. Negentropy, we have the origin of life force. Why is the two frequencies of photosynthesis exactly on that equation? Because photosynthesis is a negentropic implosive, a perfect collapse of charge, phase conjugate pump wave. So it's kind of it uses some big words, but actually the concept is very simple. The golden mean spiral allows charge to collapse, the Eilbert road to Oz, as it were. And there's all kinds of information about psychokinesis and the origin of propulsion here. We have the story of the Nazi Bell and the Vimana. They used a spiral path on the torus spiral on a donut, and we have the Hebrew and Sanskrit origins animation, golden mean.info/DNA ring, and you take that same golden spiral on the torus in the engineering prints of how the Vimana flew in the Veda, from which the Nazis learned to build the Glocke, the Nazi bell, and you see that it turns rotation of charge into acceleration of charge towards center, and this is then the origin of the real natural propulsion. As we joke about this, that the only information NASA needs in order to use the most natural form of propulsion to replace every form of transport on the planet is the following: why does an object fall to the ground? If NASA knew, then... So what we're saying is, and you can read all the equations and see the animations of that at fractalfield.com/propulsion. And this is more than an abstract exercise, because this is also how you visualize that same spiral on the torus, called Hebrew and Sanskrit. You fill your optical cortex with the focus of the vision of the sacred letters, and you produce a propulsion vector for your plasma donut, your ghost or your spirit when you dream and when you die. So if you would like to be able to navigate in the astral, we suggest you learn the science, which is really the physics of magic. And that's another story. We told that story a few times. Finally, to conclude this conversation, since your work, Fabio, which is it's nice to be hooked up with your friends and family there, is your study of the financial industry and the science of money. And we have for a long time held the view that, of course, money is simply a symbol for energy, human energy. That's all it is. In order to be a functional symbol for human energy, obviously it must be fractal, or it will never be self-organizing, clearly. So no one could argue with that idea that fractal economics has got to be the solution, because we could prove that constructive compression is the solution to most every problem history has ever defined. From the origin of computers, the origin of language, the origin of population, the origin of life, the origin of that, the origin of that, the origin of the Bible, the origin of spirituality. Perfect compression is the solution to every problem we've ever known, including alchemy and just about everything. So we could assume that non-destructive compression is the solution to economics, because it's the solution to every other problem. For example, non-destructive compression is obviously the solution to urban design. Obviously, we're getting too crowded here. How do you solve that problem? Oh, the map of the city needs to look like a rose. That's called a fractal. So, what would fractal economics mean in terms of non-destructive compression of human energy, which is to say, distribution of charge, which is perfect, called fractal, is distribution of service, distribution of money, called fractal. So what would fractal economics look like? Well, there are some examples out there. My partner Valerie is deeply into the Ananda Marga tradition, and they talk about something called PROUT, which is Progressive Utilization Theory, which is basically an attempt to discover a perfect sharing, a model for perfect sharing. In other words, if you have something, and if you're not using it to its fullest, it is your moral obligation that's to share it with someone who needs it more than you do. A model for perfect share. It's sort of like a rental services industry gone global. It's like Warren Buffett having decided that he needs to persuade every billionaire on the planet that only philanthropy is the karmic solution to being rich. In other words, how do we share perfectly? Well, waves have learned how to do this, and the way they did it is the top-down view of a rose. Now, Valerie says the solution is to put bankers in jail, but I think maybe that's a bit simplistic. I think, bankers obviously tried to achieve a shareable system. Communism many isms tried to achieve a shareable system. But fractal economics is a politics based on need, and many social governments in effect try this, but you cannot achieve sharing well in the top-down view of a city that looks like a square. It is a square metal grid that prevents the distribution of charge, and therefore the distribution of life force, and therefore the distribution of energy. So if you had an urban design where the magnetism could flow well, the top-down view of the magnetic map of Prague is a rose, and if make money in Prague because they attract tourists. Why do the tourists come there? Because it feels alive. Why does it feel alive? Why can you lucid dream there? Because the magnetic map is a rose. So you see the connection between a model for an economics based on fractality versus a model for the design of culture and cities based on fractality. So you could go a long way, and we're started on this project, and we're going to have a new paper and book on fractal economics. But you can see where this is where the spiritual ideal, the rubber hits the road. This is where we get to test whether we've actually found how to share. In a final thought, that if we know that the origin of the word politics, as in body polis, I think it's in the title of your website. The word polis comes from the term body polis, which, among other places, is used when you study beehives. If a beehive wants to grow, and it has to swarm and unpack, and it won't move, it won't swarm, it won't propagate until the plasma field of charge around that body is coherent enough that it can be navigable. In other words, you probably won't lucid dream or die well until your aura is coherent, because that's what you need to take with you. Well, the same is true of the beehive, which is to say it has a body polis that's steerable by the presence of royal blood, royal jelly. Now, if you have a source of charge radiance that makes your aura coherent, which in short is bliss, and access to a bliss process, which makes you a charge imploder, which makes you self-organizing electrically. So if you don't really have a bliss practice, probably you don't have a good immune system, and certainly you are a parasite until you do, because you don't have your own source of charge. So to have a body polis is functionally to have the hygiene skill to achieve bliss, which is ultimately the definition of whether you have culture. So what we have just said, and this might be new information for George Bush, is that the reason and function of having a body politic is to actually teach and make possible human bliss process. Charge radiance. Actually, if we collectively replaced religion with science, a true science of spirituality, and we collectively agreed on how we all get immortal, become charge radiant, take a coherent aura, and become able to go through the sun, then we all agree on what life is for, and so we can agree what people are for. And then we could have a government, a body politic, a politics based on the science of bliss. So, that's my happily ever after. I'm happy to be with you. If people like to learn more, my new book, etc., is at fractalfield.com. And thank you for inviting me.
Thank you to Dan Winter.